The man arrived at the airport before sunrise when the building still felt quiet and half asleep, and travelers moved slowly with heavy eyes and silent thoughts, and he blended into them easily without standing out or drawing attention to himself, and his name was Adam, though no one there knew it or what it meant, and to everyone around him, he was just another passenger holding a boarding pass and waiting for a flight like any other person in that long, moving line. Adam had made this choice carefully after many sleepless nights and silent thoughts and private doubts, because he owned the airline yet had not flown like a normal passenger in many years, and reports and meetings and numbers had replaced real experience, and today he wanted truth, not comfort, and reality, not praise, and so he booked a VIP seat under a different name, paid full price, and refused every internal privilege because he wanted to see what his airline had truly become. As he walked through the terminal, he noticed things most leaders never noticed, like the way staff spoke when they thought no one important was listening, and the way smiles changed depending on who stood in front of them, and the tired faces behind counters that were once filled with pride and hope, and each small detail quietly pressed against his chest without anger but with growing concern. Security passed without issue, and the gate area slowly filled with passengers holding coffee cups, bags, and quiet worries, and Adam sat among them listening to the soft noise of announcements and rolling luggage and whispered conversations, and he wondered how many people trusted his airline with their safety dreams and family stories without knowing who he was or what choices had shaped their journey. When boarding began, Adam joined the line without hesitation, and no one stopped him or greeted him by name, and that alone felt strange because he was used to doors opening and hands shaking and polite praise, but today there was nothing special, and he felt invisible in a way that was both freeing and unsettling at the same time. Inside the aircraft, the air felt familiar, yet distant, like a place he once knew well but had not visited in years, and he found his seat near the front, placed his bag below the seat, and sat quietly while observing the cabin lights, the clean rose, the calm music, and the details he himself had approved long ago during meetings filled with confidence and ambition. Two stewardesses moved through the aisle preparing the cabin, and their names were Mia and Lena, and they worked with fast practiced movements while adjusting seats, checking overhead bins, and exchanging quiet words that carried more weight than they realized, and Adam leaned back pretending to read while his attention slowly sharpened toward their voices. Mia let out a tired breath as she fixed a compartment, and shook her head with a look that carried more frustration than humor, and Lena replied with a small smile that faded quickly, and their conversation drifted from long shifts to short breaks to management pressure, and then slowly toward the airline itself, and Adam felt his focus narrow, as if the cabin had grown smaller. Mia spoke about how the company looked perfect from the outside, yet felt heavy on the inside, and how decisions made far away never seemed to consider real people, and Lena added that the owner had no idea how staff struggled daily, and that if he ever flew like a normal passenger his eyes would finally open to the truth behind the polished image. Adam felt his chest tighten, not from anger, but from shock, because these words were not careless or cruel, but honest and worn, and carried the weight of time and silence, and he realized that no report on his desk had ever sounded like this, and no meeting had ever felt this real. Lena continued quietly, saying that everyone smiled because they had to, not because they felt valued, and Mia nodded, adding that the airline talked about care and family yet forgot the people who carried that promise every day, and Adam felt a deep stillness settle inside him as the engines began to hum and the doors prepared to close. As the aircraft slowly pushed back, Adam looked around at the passengers, trusting this journey without knowing the truth unfolding just a few seats away, and he wondered how many more voices like Mia and Lena existed, unheard, unseen, and slowly losing hope, and for the first time in years, he felt less like an owner, and more like a student standing before a lesson he could no longer ignore. The plane lifted into the sky carrying everyone forward, but inside Adam something shifted quietly and firmly, and he knew this flight was not about comfort or testing service but about facing reality and listening without defense, and what he would hear next might change not only how he led the airline but who he chose to become from this moment onward. As the plane moved higher above the clouds, the cabin settled into a calm rhythm, and most passengers relaxed into their seats while soft sounds of air and movement filled the space, and Adam remained still, letting the words he had overheard settle deep inside him without reacting or showing any sign that he was listening more closely than anyone else. Mia and Lena continued their work, moving carefully through the aisle, offering drinks, checking seatbelts, and answering questions with polite voices that hid tired hearts, and Adam noticed how their smiles appeared only when needed and faded the moment they turned away, and this contrast stayed with him longer than anything they had said. When Mia reached Adam's row, she offered him a drink with professional calm, and Adam thanked her quietly, meeting her eyes for a brief moment. And in that second she looked surprised not by who he was but by how gently he spoke, and she nodded before moving on, unaware that the man she served carried the weight of every choice that shaped her working days. As the flight continued, and passengers settled into silence, Mia leaned toward Lena near the galley, and spoke again, her voice low but open like someone who had carried thoughts too long without release, and Lena listened closely, glancing around before responding, and their honesty returned stronger than before. Mia shared how she once felt proud wearing the uniform, how she believed the airline cared deeply about its people, and how over time that belief faded under pressure, short staffing, and silence from above, and Lena added that many staff felt invisible and unheard yet stayed because they loved flying and serving people despite the growing distance from leadership. Adam felt each word land with quiet force, and he wondered how long these feelings had existed without reaching him, and how many chances he had missed to listen earlier, and he realized that comfort and success had slowly built walls around him thicker than he ever intended. The cabin lights dimmed slightly, and the plane entered smooth air, and Adam stared ahead, imagining boardrooms filled with praise, while voices like these never reached those walls, and he felt a growing responsibility, heavier than ownership, heavier than profit, and closer to something personal. Lena spoke about a colleague who had left recently, not because of the work but because she felt forgotten, and Mia nodded, saying people did not need luxury or praise, they needed respect, time, and truth, and Adam felt something shift again, as if a quiet promise was forming inside him without words. A passenger nearby laughed softly, watching a movie, and the normal sound reminded Adam that this flight looked peaceful from the outside, and yet carried unseen stories beneath the surface, and he understood now that leadership meant looking beyond appearances and listening where silence lived. Later, as drinks were cleared and the aisle quieted, Mia paused near the window, taking a breath she did not realize she needed, and Adam saw the weight she carried in her posture and expression, and he wondered how many days she went home exhausted, not from work but from feeling unseen. Adam thought about revealing himself, then about stopping her and explaining everything, but he chose silence instead, knowing that truth gained through listening was more powerful than truth forced through position, and he stayed in his seat, observing, learning, and letting humility replace defense. As hours passed, the sky outside shifted colors, and the cabin felt warmer, calmer, and Adam felt a strange gratitude for this anonymous seat, because it allowed him to witness reality without filters, and he knew this experience would not end when the plane landed. Near the end of the flight, Mia and Lena shared a quiet moment by the galley, speaking about dreams beyond work, and Adam listened, realizing that behind uniforms and routines lived full human stories, and he felt a resolve forming, strong and steady. When the captain announced the upcoming landing, Adam straightened in his seat, not as an owner, but as a man who had finally heard what he needed to hear, and he knew that once his feet touched the ground, nothing inside the airline would remain the same. The plane touched down smoothly, and the cabin filled with the quiet rush of people waking up from their own thoughts and stretching for bags and checking phones and preparing to step back into life on the ground. Adam stayed seated for a moment longer than most passengers and watched the crew with a different kind of attention now. Mia and Lena moved with calm professionalism while thanking passengers and guiding them forward with polite voices and steady faces. Adam noticed that their smiles returned for every traveler, even though their earlier words still sat heavy in the air between them. He understood now that the uniform was not only fabric but a mask that had to stay in place no matter how the heart felt. When Adam finally stood and joined the line, he felt like he was carrying a secret that grew heavier with every step. In the jet bridge, the air felt cooler and louder, and the airport noise wrapped around everyone again. Adam followed the crowd toward baggage claim, and he purposely walked slowly, watching every corner of the process. He saw an older man ask for help with a connection, and the desk agent answered with a short voice without looking up. He watched a mother with a child struggle with a stroller, while two staff members passed by without offering support. None of it was dramatic or loud, yet each moment felt like a small crack in the promise his airline advertised so proudly. Adam kept his face neutral, but inside he felt a deep discomfort, because these were the moments that shaped trust. He realized the brand was not a logo or a slogan but 1,000 small choices made when no one important was watching. Near the baggage belts, a group of passengers waited as a delay message appeared on a screen. A man in a neat jacket raised his voice with frustration and asked why the bags were late, and a staff member answered sharply. The staff member did not shout, but the tone carried blame, as if the passengers were the problem for asking. Adam watched the faces around him change from tired to annoyed, and he saw how quickly respect could disappear. A supervisor arrived and spoke to the staff member in a low, annoyed voice, and then turned to the passengers with a practiced smile. The smile looked correct, but the eyes were cold, and Adam felt a sting because he knew that smile had been trained, not earned. He took a quiet breath and reminded himself he came for truth, and he was getting it in full. Adam stepped away from the crowd and found a quieter corner near a window where sunlight spilled across the floor. He opened his phone and wrote notes without using names, just details and times and small moments that showed patterns. He wrote about tone and body language and the gap between polite words and real care. He wrote about how pressure seemed to roll downhill until it landed on the passenger and the front-line worker. He wrote about how staff looked tired in a way that sleep alone could not fix. He wrote one line that felt like a hard truth, that leadership had become a distant shadow instead of a living presence. When he finished, he closed the phone and stared out at the planes lined up on the runway, thinking about the cost of silence. He decided to keep going deeper and walked toward the airline lounge where premium passengers usually waited. He entered quietly and sat in a corner again, blending in while listening to conversations around him. Two ground staff talked near the coffee station about overtime and broken promises and schedules that changed without warning. They did not know Adam could hear them, and they spoke like people who had stopped expecting anything to improve. One of them said that managers only showed up when cameras were around, and the other replied that the owner probably did not even care. Adam felt the words hit harder this time because they were repeated by different voices in a different place with the same tired meaning. He did not feel hatred toward them, he felt sadness because he understood how hopelessness forms when listening disappears. A little later, Mia and Lena entered the lounge to rest briefly before their next duty. They sat at a small table with drinks, and their shoulders finally relaxed as if they could breathe for the first time all day. Adam stayed a few seats away and listened again, not out of curiosity but out of responsibility. Mia spoke about how she used to speak proudly about the airline to her family, and how now she avoided the topic. Lena said she still loved the work and the people, but felt trapped between passengers demanding answers and managers refusing to hear questions. Mia mentioned a recent complaint where a passenger was blamed for a mistake the system had created, and she sounded ashamed while describing it. Adam noticed her voice changed when she spoke about kindness, as if kindness was something she had to defend. He realized that even good people can grow hard when the environment rewards speed more than care. Adam made a choice that felt risky and simple at the same time, and he stood and walked toward their table slowly. He did not introduce himself as the owner, and he did not act important, and he kept his voice gentle and calm. He asked a basic question about long shifts and how the airline could make things better for crew and passengers. Mia looked up with surprise, and Lena watched him carefully, as if trying to decide whether he was safe to speak to. Adam kept his posture open and his eyes steady, and he listened more than he spoke. After a pause, Mia answered honestly, saying that respect would change everything, and that staff wanted fair schedules and real support, not fancy posters. Lena added that passengers feel stress too, and that the system should make it easier, not harder. Adam nodded and thanked them like a normal passenger, and he walked away before the conversation could become uncomfortable. He returned to a quiet hallway and leaned against a wall, feeling the weight of what he had just heard directly. It was one thing to overhear private frustration, and another to invite truth and receive it without any protection. He understood now that he could not fix this with one message or one meeting or a new slogan. He needed to rebuild trust from the inside, and that required courage, patience, and a willingness to be disliked by those who benefited from the old ways. He also needed to protect workers like Mia and Lena, because honesty should never become a risk. Adam looked down at his phone again and typed a short plan for himself in simple steps, starting with listening tours and anonymous feedback and surprise audits. He knew plans were easy and action was hard, and he promised himself that this would not become another document forgotten in a folder. As evening approached, Adam left the airport and rode in a simple car to a nearby hotel under the same false name. He sat in his room with the city lights outside the window and reviewed his notes slowly. He remembered the cold smiles, the rushed answers, and the quiet despair in staff voices, and he felt a strong, steady anger forming, but it was not aimed at people. It was aimed at the system he had allowed to grow while he trusted numbers more than reality. He thought about tomorrow and what he would do next, and the choice felt clear now. He would return to the airline offices not as a distant owner surrounded by praise, but as a man who had seen the truth with his own eyes. And he would begin with the one move no one would expect from him. Morning arrived quietly, and Adam woke before his alarm with his thoughts already moving faster than the city outside the window. He dressed simply, choosing clothes that did not signal power or status, and left the hotel with no assistance and no notice. As the car moved toward the airline headquarters, he felt a steady calm mixed with determination because the path ahead was clear. He was no longer searching for answers because he had already heard them. Now he needed to see how truth behaved when it stood in front of authority. The building ahead rose tall and polished, reflecting success, confidence, and control. Adam looked at it not with pride, but with a sense of responsibility that felt heavier than ever. Inside, the lobby employees moved quickly, greeting each other and checking schedules and screens. No one recognized Adam as he walked past the desk, and that anonymity still surprised him. He noticed how different the energy felt here compared to the airport floor. Voices were sharper, movements more controlled, and smiles more careful. People here spoke the language of results and targets and appearances. Adam understood now how easily this world could lose touch with reality on the ground. He stepped into an elevator and rode it upward, watching numbers change as his thoughts stayed grounded below. Adam entered the executive floor and walked through glass hallways lined with awards and framed slogans. Words like care, excellence, and family appeared everywhere, printed clean and bold. He paused once to read them slowly, feeling the distance between the words and the truth he had heard. In a conference room, leaders gathered around a long table discussing schedules, costs, and upcoming campaigns. Adam stood outside the door, listening to voices speak confidently about performance and satisfaction. None of them mentioned staff exhaustion or passenger frustration or quiet despair. He took a breath and stepped inside. The room fell silent as eyes turned toward him. Recognition came slowly, then fully, and the mood shifted in an instant. Chairs straightened, voices softened, and faces formed polite surprise. Adam greeted them calmly, and took a seat without standing at the head of the table. He said he was there to listen, not to judge, and that alone made several people uncomfortable. One manager smiled too quickly and asked if something was wrong. Adam replied that nothing was wrong, and that was exactly the problem. He asked simple questions about crew morale and ground staff support. The answers came smooth and rehearsed, filled with numbers, surveys, and positive trends. Adam listened without interrupting, watching body language and small pauses. He asked how often leaders flew anonymously as passengers. The room grew quiet, and one person laughed lightly, saying there was no need. Adam nodded and said there was every need. He described moments he had witnessed without revealing when or where. Faces shifted and confidence wavered as reality crept into the room. Adam spoke about the difference between smiles given and smiles felt. He spoke about pressure rolling downward until it crushed kindness. He spoke about systems that rewarded speed over care and silence over honesty. No one interrupted him, and some looked away while others stared straight ahead. He did not raise his voice, and he did not accuse. He simply told the truth as he had seen it. And the truth settled heavy in the room like air before a storm. One manager tried to defend current practices, saying the industry was demanding and margins were thin. Adam agreed calmly and said pressure was real, but excuses were a choice. He asked why feedback from staff rarely reached leadership unchanged. Another leader admitted that bad news often stopped moving upward. Adam thanked him for the honesty and said that honesty would now be protected, not punished. He announced immediate changes, starting with unannounced listening visits and anonymous reporting reviewed only by him. Some leaders looked relieved, others looked afraid. Adam ended the meeting by saying leadership would now be measured not only by results but by trust. He stood and told them this was not a threat but a reset. He reminded them that every uniform represented a human being, not a resource. And every passenger represented trust, not a transaction. When he left the room, silence followed him, not from fear but from realization. Adam spent the rest of the day walking through departments without warning. He sat with support teams, listened to calls, and asked questions without judgment. At first people were cautious, but his presence felt different from inspections they were used to. He listened more than he spoke and thanked people for honesty. Stories emerged slowly about missed breaks, unclear rules, and feeling unheard. Adam wrote everything down and promised nothing except that he was listening. For many that alone felt new. Late in the afternoon, Adam visited the training center where new crew practiced routines. He watched instructors focus heavily on scripts and timing. He asked where empathy was taught, and one trainer hesitated before answering. Adam suggested adding real stories into training and inviting staff to share experiences. The idea surprised the room and sparked quiet interest. Adam smiled gently and said the best lessons often came from those living the work. He left the room knowing change would be slow but now possible. As evening settled, Adam returned to his office alone. He removed framed slogans from the wall and placed them face down on his desk. He opened his notebook and rewrote the values in his own words. Listening before speaking. Care before speed. Truth before comfort. He knew these words meant nothing unless lived daily. And he was ready to do that work even if it cost him approval. Outside, the city lights flickered on and planes crossed the sky silently. Adam watched them, thinking of Mia and Lena and countless others like them. He knew they did not need speeches or praise. They needed proof. Tomorrow he would take the final step, one that would reach every corner of the airline. And when he did, there would be no turning back. The next morning began with a quiet message sent across the airline asking all available crew and staff to gather for a company-wide address. No reason was given and no names were mentioned, which caused curiosity to spread through terminals, offices, and lounges. People whispered about inspections, changes, and possible trouble while continuing their work with careful faces. Mia and Lena received the message between duties and exchanged a look filled with questions. They wondered if the recent days felt different only to them or if something larger was moving beneath the surface. Neither of them imagined how close they were to the truth. Adam arrived at the main hangar where rows of chairs had been set and screens glowed softly at the front. Staff from every level filled the space: pilots, crew, agents, cleaners, and managers standing side by side. There was tension but also hope in the air, as if everyone felt a shift but could not name it. Adam waited backstage, listening to the quiet hum of voices, and he felt steady, not nervous. He knew this moment would define everything that came after. When the room settled, he stepped forward into the light. At first people reacted with surprise, then silence, then recognition. Whispers moved like a wave as his face appeared clearly on the screens. Some staff straightened, others froze, and a few looked away, unsure how to feel. Adam raised his hand, gently asking for calm, and the room listened. He spoke slowly, saying he had recently flown with them, not as an owner but as a passenger. A murmur spread as realization formed across faces, including Mia and Lena, who felt their breath catch. Adam continued, saying he had listened, learned, and seen more in one flight than years of meetings had ever shown him. He spoke about respect and pressure and how silence had grown between leadership and the people who carried the airline every day. He did not blame individuals and he did not defend himself. He admitted his distance and his mistakes openly and without excuse. He thanked the crew who spoke honestly without knowing who was listening. Mia felt her eyes burn as Lena held her hands together tightly. Adam said honesty would now be protected and valued, and that change would begin with listening, not orders. The room remained silent, but something warm moved through it. Adam announced immediate actions with clear steps and real timelines. Leadership would rotate through frontline roles regularly without announcement. Anonymous feedback would be reviewed directly by him with results shared openly. Schedules would be rebuilt with staff input and support teams expanded. Training would focus on empathy and real stories, not scripts alone. He promised accountability for leaders, not just workers. People listened not because they were told to, but because the words felt real. Then Adam did something no one expected. He asked Mia and Lena to stand if they were willing. The room turned toward them as they slowly rose, unsure but supported by nods around them. Adam thanked them publicly for their honesty and courage without repeating their words. He said their voices represented many others and deserved respect, not fear. Applause began softly, then grew until the hangar filled with sound. Mia felt tears fall freely, and Lena smiled through emotion, feeling seen for the first time. In the weeks that followed, the airline changed in small, steady ways. Leaders appeared on flights, loading bags, answering questions, and listening quietly. Break rooms improved, schedules softened, and conversations opened. Passengers noticed warmer tones and real care replacing forced smiles. Mistakes were addressed openly without blame and staff spoke up without fear. Mia and Lena felt lighter at work, not because it was easier but because it was honest. Adam stayed present, walking, listening, and learning every day. Months later Adam flew again, sitting in a regular seat, watching the cabin come alive. Mia passed by and smiled naturally, this time not from duty but from pride. Lena greeted a nervous passenger with patience and warmth. Adam leaned back, knowing trust had begun to return, not through words but through action. The airline was no longer perfect, but it was human again. And for the first time Adam felt truly worthy of owning it.